Last summer I decided to take a road trip by myself from Ohio down to Florida. I'd just graduated college and wanted to do something on my own before starting my job in the fall. The drive was supposed to take about 16 hours, so I planned to split it up over 2 days and stop somewhere in Georgia for the night. I left early Saturday morning around 6 a.m. The first several hours were pretty boring, just highway driving through familiar areas. I had my playlist going and was making good time. By early afternoon, I was in Tennessee and stopped at a rest area to grab some food and stretch my legs. While I was walking back to my car, I noticed a guy standing near the driver's side. He was maybe in his 30s, wearing a red jacket and jeans. When he saw me coming, he walked away toward a silver minivan parked a few spots down. I thought maybe he was just looking at my car or something. I had an older Honda Civic that wasn't anything special, so it was kinda weird, but whatever. I got back on the road and drove for another few hours. Around 4 p.m., I stopped at a gas station to fill up. As I was pumping gas, I noticed a silver minivan pull in on the other side of the pumps. I glanced over and saw it was the same guy from the rest area. He was wearing the same red jacket. That felt like a weird coincidence, but the highway only had one main route, so I figured we were just heading in the same direction. He went inside the gas station while I finished pumping. I paid at the pump and left before he came back out. I kept driving and tried not to think about it. Another hour passed and I was getting into Georgia. The sun was starting to go down, and I was thinking about finding a motel soon since I was getting tired. I saw a sign for a town coming up in 15 miles and decided that's where I'd stop for the night. I took the exit and drove into this small town. It wasn't much, just a main street with some shops and restaurants, and I could see a motel sign down the road. As I was driving toward the motel, I checked my rearview mirror and my stomach dropped. The silver minivan was behind me. Same van, same guy in the red jacket driving it. I told myself I was being paranoid. Lots of people take this exit. Lots of people stay at motels off the highway. It didn't mean anything. I pulled into the motel parking lot and the minivan drove past. I watched it go down the street and turn at the next intersection. I sat in my car for a minute, trying to calm down. I was probably just freaking myself out over nothing. I went inside and got a room on the first floor. The motel was pretty run down, but it was cheap and I only needed it for one night. My room was at the end of the building, last door on the right. I brought my bag in and locked the door behind me. I ordered a pizza to the room and tried to relax. I turned on the TV and scrolled through my phone while I waited. The pizza came after about 40 minutes and I ate while watching some random show. By 9 p.m., I was exhausted and ready to sleep. I got ready for bed and was just about to turn off the lights when I heard a car door close outside. I looked out the window and saw the silver minivan parked 3 spots down from my car. My heart started pounding. This couldn't be a coincidence anymore. The guy had followed me to this specific motel. I watched through the window, but I didn't see anyone get out. The van was just sitting there with the engine off. I waited for maybe 10 minutes, but nobody appeared. The driver's seat looked empty from what I could see. I closed the curtain and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to figure out what to do. Should I call the police and tell them what? That someone parked near me? That wouldn't sound like an emergency. I decided to just lock everything and try to sleep. If anything actually happened, then I'd call the police. I turned off the lights and got into bed, but I couldn't sleep. Every little sound outside made me jump. I kept thinking about that guy standing by my car at the rest area. Had he been doing something to it? Putting a tracker on it? That would explain how he kept finding me. Around 11 p.m., I heard footsteps outside my door. Slow footsteps, like someone was walking along the motel rooms. They stopped right outside my door. I held my breath and didn't move. There was silence for what felt like forever. Then I heard the doorknob turn slightly, like someone was testing to see if it was locked. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but didn't press call yet. I just waited. The doorknob stopped moving. Then I heard the footsteps walk away, going back toward the parking lot. I got up and looked through the peephole, but couldn't see anyone. I went to the window and carefully pulled back the curtain just enough to see out. The silver minivan was still there, but now I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat, just sitting there in the dark, facing my room. That's when I called 911. I told them everything, about seeing the same vehicle following me since Tennessee, about it being parked outside my room. about someone trying my door handle. The dispatcher said they'd send an officer right away. I stayed on the phone with her until the police arrived. It took about 12 minutes. When the cop car pulled into the parking lot with its lights on, the minivan immediately started up and drove away. The officer tried to follow it but lost it after a few turns. Another officer stayed and took my statement. I gave them the license plate number that I'd memorized while I was waiting. They ran it and said the plate came back to a different vehicle entirely. A pickup truck registered 2 states away. The plates on the minivan were stolen. The officer walked around my car with a flashlight and found a small GPS tracker stuck under the rear bumper. That's how he'd been following me. The officer removed it and bagged it as evidence. They offered to move me to a different motel, but I said I just wanted to leave. It was almost 1 a.m., but I didn't care. I drove another 3 hours that night just to put distance between me and that town, only stopping when I found a busy hotel in a well-lit area. The police called me 2 days later. They'd tracked down the minivan abandoned in a parking garage about 50 miles from where I'd been. No fingerprints, wiped clean. They found similar GPS trackers in the van, like he had a whole collection of them. Apparently, there had been other reports over the past few months of people feeling like they were being followed on that same highway route, but nothing concrete enough to investigate. They think this guy had been targeting solo travelers, following them until they stopped somewhere isolated. I never found out what he was planning to do. The police said they're still looking for him but don't have any solid leads. They told me I did the right thing by calling when I did. I think about that night all the time, about how he was at my door, testing the handle, about how he was just sitting in that van watching my room, about what would have happened if I'd stayed another night, or if I'd picked a more isolated motel, or if I hadn't noticed him following me. I made it to Florida the next day, but I couldn't even enjoy the trip. I ended up cutting it short and driving back home after just 3 days. The whole drive back, I was constantly checking my mirrors, paranoid that every vehicle behind me was following me. I haven't done a solo road trip since. I don't think I ever will again. This happened about 2 years ago when I was driving cross-country from Arizona to North Carolina for a job relocation. It was December, and I wanted to get there before Christmas, so I was pushing through some long days of driving. I'd been on the road for about 3 days already and was somewhere in Texas on a pretty empty stretch of highway. It was late afternoon, maybe around 5 p.m., and the sun was starting to get low. I hadn't seen another car in probably 20 minutes. Then I saw something up ahead on the side of the road. As I got closer, I could see it was a car with its hazard lights on. A white sedan pulled over on the shoulder. There was a woman standing next to it, waving her arms at me. I slowed down and pulled over in front of her car. I'm not usually the type to stop for strangers, but it was getting dark and cold, and she looked genuinely distressed. I got out and walked back to where she was standing. She was probably in her late 20s, wearing jeans and a heavy coat. She looked really relieved when I stopped. "Thank God," she said. "My car died, and I don't have any cell service out here. I've been stuck for like an hour." I pulled out my phone and checked. She was right, no service at all. I told her I could give her a jump or try to take a look at her car if she wanted. She said she thought it was the battery. I went back to my car to get my jumper cables. When I came back with them, she was on the phone. I was confused because she'd just said there was no service, but I figured maybe she'd walked up the road a bit and found a spot with signal. "My brother's coming," she said, putting her phone away. "He's only about 20 minutes out. You don't have to stay if you're in a hurry." I told her I didn't mind waiting to make sure her brother showed up, especially since it was getting dark. She seemed grateful, and we just stood there making small talk. She said she was heading to visit family for the holidays. I told her I was moving for work. After about 5 minutes, a truck appeared in the distance, coming from the direction I'd been driving. It slowed down as it approached us and pulled over behind my car. A guy got out. He was tall, maybe in his 30s, wearing a flannel jacket and a baseball cap. He walked up to us and the woman smiled at him. "That was fast," she said. The guy didn't say anything to her. He looked at me and asked if everything was okay. I explained that her car had broken down and I'd stopped to help. He nodded slowly and asked if I'd already tried jumping it. I said we hadn't gotten that far yet. He walked over to her car and popped the hood, looking inside for a minute. Then he called me over. "Can you try starting it?" he said to the woman. She got in the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine started right up, no problem at all. She turned it off and got back out, looking surprised. "I guess it just needed to sit for a while," she said. The guy closed her hood and wiped his hands on his jeans. He thanked me for stopping and said they were good to go now. Something about the whole interaction felt off to me, but I couldn't place what it was. I got back in my car and pulled out onto the highway. In my rearview mirror, I saw both of them get in the truck, not her car, and start following behind me. That's when it clicked. She'd said her brother was 20 minutes out, but he showed up in 5 minutes from the direction I'd been driving. And her car started fine when she tried it. And now they were both leaving her car on the side of the road and following me. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. This was some kind of setup. I sped up a bit and the truck sped up too, staying about the same distance behind me. I kept checking my mirrors every few seconds. They stayed right there, not getting closer but not falling back either. I didn't know what to do. I still had no cell service. There were no towns or exits for miles according to the last sign I'd seen. It was just empty highway in both directions. After maybe 10 minutes of driving like this, I saw headlights coming from the opposite direction, a semi-truck. As it got closer, I made a split-second decision. I flashed my high beams at the truck driver, on and off several times. I didn't know if it would help, but I was desperate. The semi slowed down and I saw the driver looking at me as we passed each other. In my mirror, I watched the semi pull over to the side of the road and turn on its hazards. Then I saw the truck that had been following me slow down. It pulled over too, stopping near where the semi was parked. I kept driving. I didn't slow down. I just kept going as fast as I safely could. I kept watching my mirrors, but the truck didn't follow me anymore. It stayed there with the semi. About 15 minutes later, I finally got cell service back. I immediately called 911 and told them everything. The woman with the broken down car, the guy showing up, them following me, all of it. I gave them the mile marker I'd passed and descriptions of the vehicles. The dispatcher kept me on the phone while I drove. She said they were sending highway patrol to that area to check it out. She told me to drive to the next town and wait at a public place for an officer to take my statement. I drove for another 30 minutes until I hit a small town. I pulled into a truck stop that was busy and well lit and waited in the parking lot. A state trooper showed up about 20 minutes later. I told him the whole story again. He said when officers got to that stretch of highway, they found the white sedan abandoned on the shoulder, but no other vehicles around. They were checking the car's registration and looking at security footage from nearby gas stations. The trooper told me that there had been reports of a similar scam in that area. A woman pretends to have car trouble. A good Samaritan stops to help, and then someone else shows up. Usually they try to rob the person who stopped, sometimes worse. The fact that they followed me suggested they might have been planning something once we got to a more isolated area, or once it got fully dark. He said I did the right thing by signaling that semi-driver. He probably scared them off by stopping and being a witness. I drove the rest of the way to North Carolina, but I barely slept for the next 2 nights. Every car behind me made me nervous. Every time I had to stop for gas, I was looking over my shoulder constantly. The police called me a week later. They'd tracked down the white sedan to a rental company. It had been rented using a stolen credit card. They were still investigating but didn't have any suspects yet. I think about how close I came to whatever they had planned. If that semi hadn't been coming from the other direction right when I needed it, or if the driver hadn't noticed my signal, I might not have made it to North Carolina at all. I still stop to help people when I can, but now I'm a lot more careful about it. I always call the police first before getting out of my car, even if it means waiting longer. And I never stop anywhere that doesn't have cell service. That woman's face still pops into my head sometimes. How relieved and grateful she looked when I first pulled over. How normal the whole thing seemed until it didn't. That's what scares me the most. How easy it was for them to make me think I was doing the right thing when I was actually walking into a trap. I took a road trip last October from California to visit my sister in Colorado. It was supposed to be a nice relaxing drive through some scenic areas. I'd done long drives before, so I wasn't worried about it. I left on a Thursday morning and planned to make it to Colorado in 2 days, stopping somewhere in Utah for the night. The first day went smooth. I drove through Nevada and into Utah, making good time. Around 7 p.m., I started looking for a place to stop. Most of the hotels I passed were either full or way too expensive. I kept driving, figuring I'd find something cheaper further down, but I ended up on this stretch of road that didn't have much of anything, just desert and the occasional small town. By 9 p.m., I was getting really tired and desperate to find somewhere to sleep. I saw a sign for a town coming up in 8 miles. When I got there, it was tiny, maybe one main street with a few buildings, but there was a motel with a vacancy sign lit up. I pulled in and went to the office. An older guy was behind the counter, probably in his 60s. He seemed friendly enough and said they had rooms available. I paid cash for one night and he gave me a key to room 12. The motel was old, like really old. The kind of place that probably looked dated even 20 years ago. My room was on the ground floor, third door from the office. I brought my bag inside and locked the door. The room was pretty rough. Stained carpet, ancient TV, weird smell. But I was exhausted and just needed to sleep. I texted my sister to let her know where I was staying, took a quick shower, and got into bed. I fell asleep fast, but I woke up sometime in the middle of the night. I'm not sure what woke me up, but when I checked my phone, it was 2:30 a.m. I laid there for a minute, trying to fall back asleep. That's when I heard voices outside, multiple people talking in low voices. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded like they were right outside my door. I got up quietly and went to the window. I pulled the curtain back just a tiny bit and looked out. There were 3 people standing in the parking lot near my car, 2 men and a woman. They were looking at my car and pointing at it, talking to each other. One of the men walked up to my car and tried the door handle. It was locked. He cupped his hands and looked through the driver's side window. My stomach dropped. I watched them for another minute. They were definitely focused on my car. The woman walked around to the back and looked at my license plate, then said something to the men. I didn't know what to do. Should I go out there and confront them? Call the police? I decided to just wait and see what they did. After a few minutes, they walked away from my car and headed toward the motel office. I watched them go inside. Through the office window, I could see them talking to the guy who'd checked me in. They were in there for maybe 5 minutes before they came back out. Then they started walking toward the rooms, specifically toward my room. I backed away from the window and grabbed my phone. I dialed 911 but hesitated before pressing call. They hadn't actually done anything yet. What would I even say? But then I heard footsteps right outside my door. They stopped. I heard voices again, talking quietly. One of them said something about making sure first. I pressed call. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered that there were people outside my motel room acting suspicious. She asked for my location, and I gave her the address of the motel. As I was talking to her, I heard a key slide into my door lock. Someone was unlocking my door from the outside. I told the dispatcher someone was trying to get into my room. She told me to stay calm and that officers were on their way. The door handle started to turn. I ran to the door and threw my weight against it. The door pushed open about an inch, but I shoved it closed. I heard someone curse on the other side. Then they pushed harder. I was pushing back with everything I had, my feet sliding on the carpet. The dispatcher was still on the phone asking if I was okay. I was yelling that they were trying to force their way in. Then I heard a man's voice through the door. "Police, open the door!" I didn't believe it. That made no sense. I yelled back that I was already on the phone with 911, and if they were really police, they'd know that. There was a pause. Then I heard them talking to each other outside. Footsteps going away from my door. I stayed pressed against the door, breathing hard. The dispatcher said units were about 10 minutes out. I needed to hold on. I waited there, keeping pressure on the door for what felt like forever. Eventually, I heard sirens. I looked out the window and saw 2 police cars pull into the parking lot with their lights on. Real police this time. I opened the door and 2 officers were standing there. I was shaking as I told them what happened. They said they'd gotten the 911 call, and when they arrived, the office was empty, and they saw 3 people running toward the back of the property. One officer stayed with me while the others searched the area. About 20 minutes later, they came back and said the 3 people had gotten away, but they'd found something in the office. A copy of a master key for all the rooms was sitting on the counter. The register was open and cash was missing. The owner of the motel was also missing. the older guy who'd checked me in. They found him about an hour later tied up in a storage room behind the office. Apparently, those 3 people had broken into the office while everyone was asleep. They'd tied up the owner and were going through the guest records to see who was staying there. They saw I'd paid in cash and figured I might have more money on me. They took the master key and were planning to rob the rooms one by one, starting with mine since I was alone and had a California license plate. Probably thought I was a tourist with cash. When I called 911, they tried to pretend they were police to get me to open the door willingly. When that didn't work, they ran. The police said I did exactly the right thing by not opening the door. They also said this kind of thing had happened at a few other small motels in the area over the past year. They thought it might be the same group. I didn't sleep at all the rest of that night. An officer drove me to a different hotel in a bigger town about 30 minutes away. I checked in there and left as soon as the sun came up. The police contacted me a few days later. They'd arrested 2 of the 3 people, a man and the woman. The second man got away. They found my room key in the woman's pocket and the master key in the man's car. Both had previous arrests for robbery. They're still looking for the 3rd person. I made it to my sister's place the next day, but I was a mess. I kept thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. If I hadn't seen them outside. If I'd been a heavier sleeper, and they just walked right in while I was asleep. The worst part is knowing that the guy who checked me in was tied up the whole time. When I was standing at that counter paying for my room, they could have already been in that back room watching through a crack in the door, waiting for me to go to sleep. I can't stay in small motels anymore. Even the thought of it makes me anxious. I only stay at big chain hotels now, the kind with security cameras and multiple staff members. And I never pay cash anymore. I don't want anyone knowing I have money on me. My sister keeps telling me I should just fly next time I visit. She's probably right.